Welcome to Silent Promises, a podcast that brings your love stories of the past, told through real letters exchanged during separation and hardship. I'm your host, Keira, and in this series, we'll be reading love letters that connect people across time, distance, and even war.
Today's episode is very personal. I'm sharing the story of my grandparents and parents, whose love was tested by the years of physical distance. These threads weave the story together, stories of separation and longing, of promises written on paper and sent across distances. My family, like many others, lived through Vietnam's hardest days. First was the war, and then the economic hardship followed. They didn't have mobile phones or the internet to stay in touch. Just letters. Letters full of hope, love, and promises for the better future. It was August 1964, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident, when the US bombed North Vietnam for the first time. My grandparents were geologists working at the General Department of Geology in Hanoi, a big company. During the height of the war, my grandfather has transferred to the coal mining area of Quang Ninh for more than 5 years. Until 1969, he was stationed far from home, deep in the chaos of the war zone. My grandmother, back in Hưng Yên, waited for his letters, each one arriving infrequently, might be for months, but carrying the weight of his heart.
My dearest, the nights here stretch endlessly. I lie awake under the stars, listening to the river flow nearby, surrounded by the jungle and towering mountains. Our shelter is a small leaf hut, where my comrades and I rest after long days of searching for coals and minerals in this rugged land. I think of you constantly, imagining you alone at home, caring for her 3 children. The sounds of the jungle make me feel the distance, but in my heart, I see your face, and it keeps me going. My love, through all of this, I am driven by the hope of a peaceful and thriving future for our country. Despite the distance and hardship, I believe in the better days to come for us in our homeland. All my love, until we're together again.
In a time without instant messages, their love had to survive on these letters. My grandfather had no idea when his words would reach home, and my grandmother had no idea when, or if she would receive a reply. Love in the times of war was not just about surviving the present, it was about believing in the future that seemed impossible to reach, and the letters were their lifeline. When they were finally reunited, they vowed never to be apart again. Despite the upheaval of the moving from north to south and resettling whenever they could, they stayed together. Now, in their 90s, they are still side by side, embodying a love that endured through war, distance, and the many places they called home. My father worked as an engineer on an oil rig far out at sea. It was 500 kilometers from the nearest shore, isolated from the world. It was a job he had worked hard to get, but it came with a great sacrifice. For years, he had separated from my mother and us. My brother was born just before my father left for the rig, and when my father finally returned, my brother was already 3 years old. That time was a trial of strength, patience, and love for my mother.
I'm sitting here on the oil rig, looking out at the vast ocean, thinking about you and the kids. The nights are long and sleepless, and all I can think about is the day I can come home, taking the children on the motorbike to school every day. I know you're handling everything on your own, taking care of the little ones, managing the house, and working too. I promise I'll find a way to be closer. To get another job, so we won't have to live apart anymore. But things are so difficult right now, my love. I miss home so much. I remember the meals you'd make, and I wish you could send me a bit of that home-cooked food. It would mean the world out here. The winds and waves are strong, and the nights get cold, so if you can, please send me some extra thick socks and a warm sweater too. Every time I send a letter, I just hope it reaches you soon. Hoping you're still healthy and that the kids are doing well. I'm holding on to the hope that soon this separation will be over and I can take care of you.
For years, my father made promises to my mother in those letters. But despite his efforts, the years passed. 3 years became 5. 5 became 10. And eventually, 20 years had passed before he could finally transfer to the land-based job. My mother's story is one of the quiet strength. She raised my brother and me alone for much of our childhood, while my father was far away at sea. She didn't have the comforts of the modern conveniences like video calls or texting. The letters from my father were her only connection to him, and they were few and far between.
Khổ chứ, trời ơi, nuôi con mà mình khổ chứ, cô độc chứ.
It was exhausting. At that time, I only had your grandparents to help take care of you. When you got sick or lost your appetite and needed to go to the hospital, I had to manage everything on my own, dealing with power outages and no one else to help at home. I also had to go to work every day. I wrote so many letters, begging your father to come home. He promised he would, but the situation made it impossible. Gradually, I got used to it. I kept working until you all grew up and achieved many academic achievements. Those successes became my motivation, my way of holding on to hope.
My mother's strength didn't come easily. She endured moments of deep loneliness, exhaustion, and stress. Yet, she never gave up. In many ways, her love for my father grew stronger in his absence. She understood why she had us, her children, and her family nearby. My father had nothing but the cold, open sea and his distant hopes of returning home. That thought gave her the resilience to carry on.
I know we needed economic stability, and I understood your father's fears about not having enough money to support you or buy a house. We both sacrificed a lot for the emotional well-being of our family. Now, it may feel late for some things, but we accept it because those were the choices we made together. We did what we thought was best for all of you, and I hope you can appreciate the journey we've been on.
I remember a time when I was separated from someone I love. We texted every day and called often, but each conversation left an emptiness, a reminder that they were just a voice or words on a screen. Sometimes those messages meant to bridge the distance only reminded me of it more. It makes me wonder, could I do the same? Could I endure nearly 30 years of waiting, like my mother did? Could I hold on to love even when the person I love is far away for so long? Today, love can sometimes feel fleeting, with constant connection. It's as if we expect instant responses, as if everything should happen on our timeline. We want instant understanding and instant reassurance. But my parents' and grandparents' love was different, built on patience, trust, and faith in the strength of their promises. It was a love that survived in the spaces between words, where promises became anchors, grounding them through years. Maybe in today's world, we don't have to wait for letters anymore. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from the patience and resilience that came from those who long wait. Love, at its core, is about trust. trusting in the promises we make in the hope that, no matter what, we will find our way back to each other. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Silent Promises. Until next time, may we all remember that love isn't only about the present, but about the promises that carry us forward.
This is Keira Vo. This podcast piece is produced by Keira. Special thanks to my mom, Jazang Lu, and the voice talents, Kantawat Malasai, Hui Zheng, and Bao Min Ho. Visit Silence Promises online at thesilencepromises.com, where you can share your stories on the show or ask any questions you have. I'm Keira Vo. Thank you for listening and goodbye.